Hello friends, it's time to talk about everything that I read in September, and I have some things to share. The first thing that I read this month was Rouge by Mona Awad. I got this as an advanced listener copy from Libro FM, so thank you to Libro FM. I absolutely loved this book, and the audiobook is also incredible. Would highly recommend the audiobook. This is Mona Awad's new release. It just came out. Personally, I really enjoyed it. I think I've heard some mixed reviews of it, but I especially enjoyed this mother-daughter relationship, the conversations that we were having about the beauty industry. We were really following this kind of descent into madness, which I absolutely loved the journey that we were on. Our main character's mother dies, and she ends up going to California where her mother lived to kind of clean out her apartment, pack up her life, go to her funeral, and she ends up involved with this culty spa that her mother was involved with. She's obsessed with beauty products and skincare, and there's a really interesting delve into that world. I absolutely loved how this book played out, and I'm someone who doesn't tend to love when something like this, in this sort of weird horror-ish genre, ends up with a hopeful ending, but I did really appreciate it in this book, and I'm wondering if my tastes are changing because I'm going to say that about another book later in this stack, and I really enjoyed my time with this. It did, I will say, reading this book put me in a bad mood because I just felt this anxiety and this descent into madness. I think Mona Awad did a really great job of that. I listened to this book primarily while I was cleaning out my last house. I just moved this month, and it just put me in a bad mood. I just felt unsettled and anxious and worried, and I think that goes to show how good the book did what it was trying to do. But be warned, don't go into this if you're in a bad mental space. I would know what you're getting yourself into. Then I read How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I picked this up, I think, on release day when it came out months and months ago, and I picked it up and I started reading, and I found out that the main premise of this is that we have our main character who gets a phone call that her parents have both died in a tragic accident, and she needs to go back to where they live to clean out the house with her brother. Spooky things go down. The house is haunted. I am absolutely terrified of my parents dying, so I had to put it down. I had to put it down until I was in a really good headspace, and that was this month. I picked it up. I really, really enjoyed it. I love Grady Hendrix as an author. I think my favorite book of his is still The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which was the first one that I read. I just adore that book so much. I love how over the top his horror gets. This was gross and scary and horrifying, and it was also very funny and campy and relatable, especially in the brother-sister dynamics and the oldest child, youngest child situation. We get some parenting moments in here too, because our main character does have a young daughter. That comes into play in a big way in the second half of the book, which I was not expecting. There are just so many layers to this, and I really liked everywhere that we went. There are puppets that come to life. They are horrifying. I had a really, really good time. And this is the other book that I feel like ends in a very hopeful way. Usually I hate that in horror, and this month I read 2 books that ended hopefully that I really liked. And I'm not entirely sure if that's just they did that really well, which it totally could be, or if maybe my tastes are changing a little bit, which could also be interesting. So stay tuned to find out more about that. But yes, I really did enjoy How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I enjoyed everything that I read this month, you guys. This is just banger after banger. I had a really good reading month. I only read 8 things this month, but I feel like everything that I did read, I really enjoyed. Next up is Coraline. I can't believe I have never read Coraline before. I've read the Graveyard Book, which I think is my favorite. I've read The Ocean at the End of the Lane. I really love the Sandman TV series. I'd love to pick up those comics. I also really enjoyed Stardust, and I can't believe I've never read Coraline. I've watched the movie many times, but I've never read the book, and can confirm the book is absolutely exceptional. I really enjoyed my time with Coraline. We're following this girl who finds a door to a parallel world in which she meets her other mother, her other father. There's a snarky black cat animal companion in this who I absolutely loved. Neil Gaiman's writing just hits a very specific part in my heart that I love. I love the way that it feels like a fairy tale. I love when we are hearing from a child's perspective. I love when it is truly dark. I just absolutely love his mixture of all of those things. It's one of my favorite things to get in a book. I think reading Coraline definitely put me in the mood for fall. I was so excited to pick up more fall books after reading Coraline. So if you're like me and you've watched the movie and never picked up the book, I would highly encourage you to do so. I think they definitely add something to each other, and it made me really excited to go back and watch the movie later this month as well. September was also the month of finishing series. I finally finished the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers. This is The Galaxy and the Ground Within. I'm not sure if she has plans to write more books in this series. They're set up in a way that they're almost standalones, but not quite. Especially this book, I think you definitely would have to read the first book in order to understand it all completely. But the way that they are set up is we're following different characters' stories at different parts in their lives, and they are usually tangentially related to the characters we are following in the first book. The first book, by the way, is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. These books are cozier sci-fi, although I will say I think the series does get a little bit more intense as it progresses. So the third and the fourth book, I would say, are more intense than the first and second book. I would say the second book is probably the most cozy of the grouping. In this book, we are following this one planet and this group of people who end up there together. The planet is kind of like a truck stop, and it is a waypoint in between all of these little tunnels. So there are lots of people who are going to different places, and they're stopping over on this planet for a day or two. Something happens where they get stuck on this planet, and then we are kind of discovering what's going on with their lives. They're kind of having to come together into this beautiful little found family to help each other with the various things after their travel plans are delayed and their struggles kind of come to the surface. We have tension going on. We have lots of interspecies cultural understanding that is not always easy. It's just a really beautiful book. I absolutely love Becky Chambers' writing. I love the way that she tackles such big topics in such an intimate way, because truly when we get down to it, we are tackling big questions about cultural exchange and questions about understanding other people who have different views and opinions and who are a different species from you. And we're doing it all in a very personal way, and I just love it. I will forever and always pick up anything that Becky Chambers writes. The other series I finished this month was the Wayward Children series. It's actually kind of funny. I finished the Wayfarers series and the Wayward Children series. I finished the last two books in this, so this is Where the Drowned Girls Go, and the last one is Lost in the Moment and Found, which I don't own, but I listened to on audiobook and really enjoyed. I love this series for a lot of the same reasons why I love Becky Chambers' writing. I feel like Shauna Maguire in this series specifically does a really great job of tackling these big questions in a really personal, intimate way. We are following children who have gone through portals to other worlds. They've had a Narnia type situation, and they go to worlds that are perfect for them. And they leave our world because our world isn't serving them correctly. They're not able to be truly themselves and thrive here. So they go to these other worlds, and then through a series of events, they end up back in our world. And it's really traumatic and difficult for them to be back in our world, especially when people don't believe them that they went to another world. They were a hero over there, and here they're just a kid. In half of the books, we're in various worlds following one of the children. And then in the other half of the books, we're at Eleanor West's home for wayward children. In this book, we go to a different school. So Eleanor West has this home for wayward children. It's a school where she takes all these kids who've gone to these other worlds and helps them to process that grief and that trauma, and ultimately helps them to try to get back to their worlds if they can. There's also another school that is the complete opposite, where they try to kind of like beat that world out of them so that they can function in our society. In this book, Where the Drowned Girls Go, we go to that other school because one of our children who we're following, she's had some additional trauma with worlds, and she wants to forget. She wants to lose her ties to this world. So she goes to the school, hijinks ensue. It was a really amazing book. This is one of my favorites out of this whole series. I really enjoyed the way that all of our characters interacted with each other. And then the last book, Lost in the Moment and Found, was definitely the hardest book to read out of this series. We're dealing with some pretty tough topics, so I would definitely recommend checking content warnings for this entire series, but especially for Lost in the Moment and Found. And the author also gives a little warning at the beginning of the book, which I definitely appreciated the way that that was done as well. We're following this girl who runs away from home because there are bad things going on at home, and she ends up in this world where all the lost things go, and she ends up traveling to all of these different worlds and going to marketplaces and finding lost things. And there's a reveal that happens later in the book about the price that she's paying, and it's just a really interesting book. I feel like I want to say that these books just keep getting better, but I've loved this series from the beginning, and I think it's just such a testament to Shauna Maguire's writing that she is able to just keep putting out incredible book after incredible book in such a long novella series. I feel like a novella is a hard thing to get right. It's hard to pack in this much world building and character development, and we're tackling big topics in here, and she just does it so well in such an entertaining way and really packs a punch in such a short book. I just really, really love this series. Can't wait for the next one to come out next year. And then I picked up People We Meet on Vacation. I was not expecting to read this. I just hauled this on Wednesday, and I was not expecting to read this in September because it's a very vacation-y. I thought I was gonna read it during a summer vacation in the future, and I absolutely tore through it. I could not help myself. I had such a good time with this. I love Emily Henry's books. This was the last of her adult romances that I had not read. We are following these two friends who always go on a vacation together every single year. We get a lot of backstory about how this vacation tradition came to come. We get to flash back to different vacations throughout their vacation life journey, if you will. And then we're also following them this summer as they go on one last vacation after they haven't talked to each other in like a year or two, I believe. The third act conflict in this I didn't love. I feel like Emily Henry usually does a really good job about making that very realistic and not a miscommunication trope, but I didn't love the way that it played out in here. But I did end up liking the things that it had to say about like making sure that you're not just thinking about yourself when you're doing something and thinking about how that affects another person and being really thoughtful about that. I liked the messages that came out of it. I just didn't love the journey of that miscommunication situation that was going on. I did really love the romance. I love a friends to lovers trope. I had a really good time following our two friends on all of these different vacations too, when things are going really well and things are really not going so well with the vacation and how that affects their relationship. And at the end of the day, I did have a really good time, and I am very excited to pick up Emily Henry's new release, which I think is coming out April of next year and is called Funny Story. I'm excited to pick up another Emily Henry. I just want more. I've not been the biggest romance girly, but Emily Henry always does it for me. Then I picked up One Dark Window because I wanted to scratch the Fourth Wing itch. I absolutely loved Fourth Wing. I will link the video up here if you want to hear full thoughts in the month that I read that, because I had many of them. I just wanted something that was fun. I wanted it to be dark. I wanted a little romance, and I picked up One Dark Window, and I have to say, I did really enjoy this. I didn't enjoy it as much as Fourth Wing, and there are like a couple of things that made me roll my eyes. So let me tell you what this is about, and then we'll get into what I liked and what I didn't like, because there's a little bit of a mixed bag with this. In this book, we're following our main character who is in this world where we have this really interesting magic system that's based off of these cards that hold magic. And so different cards have different magics. So like if you have the Scythe card, you can basically control other people and tell them what to do, but it causes you excruciating pain. And there are trade-offs like that for every single card. Our main character has a 400-year-old nightmare monster living in her head, and it is very fun, the dynamic between them. It's very dark, but it is also very fun, the way that the nightmare talks and interacts with her. And I have to say, I think this was really well done. I think there are parts of this book where you do kind of have to take your critical thinking cap off a little bit. I did roll my eyes at some things, but I also did that when I read Fourth Wing, and I still really enjoyed that. So I think this is probably a good comparison to Fourth Wing. I think if you liked that, you have a good chance of liking this. The one thing that bothered me about this is it does this really cool thing at the beginning of every chapter where we get a little excerpt from this book, which was written by this king long ago. The book is written in verse, and it's talking about magic. And the thing that bothered me so much, and this is just a stupid pet peeve and has nothing to say about the quality of this writing, but the first phrase is usually repeated at the end, and I think a lot of times I'm gonna read you the one on chapter 9 so you see what I'm talking about, because I'm having a hard time explaining this. There must be touch, there must be intention. Tap a Providence card thrice to command its magic. Tap it thrice more and its magic will cease. Guard it in your cloak, your house. But be wary, magic knows no loyalty. Should someone else touch the card, its magic shall be theirs to command. There must be touch, there must be intention. So we're repeating the first sentence at the end, and I feel like 9 times out of 10, if we had just left off that repeat, it would have landed a lot better. And I didn't like it, and that's a personal preference. The problem is that it happens all the time, and oftentimes when the nightmare guy is speaking from inside our main character's head, he also does that and speaks in verse and also repeats things, and kind of drove me mad a little bit. And that was the one thing that I didn't like about this. Everything else, I felt like I really very much enjoyed. The romance is a little bit eye-rolly at times, especially before the romance really gets into it and they're kind of doing like a fake courtship situation. And it's just kind of really annoying to watch this miscommunication happen because she thinks that he's not into her and that's why he's upset about this fake courtship. And then she gets really mad about that. And then she's like, oh, well, I really don't like him. And it's just kind of annoying, but that's what you get when you read a romance book. I understood what I was getting myself into. I had a good time. It's not my favorite thing I've ever read. I will be continuing in the series. I will say I really did enjoy how well fleshed out this magic system was, and I really liked the world that our author created. I think it was really, really well done. I liked the amount that the romance was in the book. It definitely wasn't like the only thing that I cared about. I would have read this without the romance at all, and I would have still had a good time, and I think that's a good mark of a fantasy romance to me. And that's everything that I read in September. I would love to hear if you read any of the things that I read this month. If you have thoughts that are different, similar, let's chat about it in the comments. Let me know if you're considering picking any of these up. I would love to know what you guys have been reading this past month. I'm hoping to get my reading back up. I've been not reading a ton the past couple of months, and I would really like to get back over 10 books a month. That is my goal for October. We shall see if I am able to do that. 90% of the books that I read this month I read in the past 10 days. So I think we are back on the trajectory that we need to be in order to get my reading back up to speed. I'd love to read 50,000 pages this year, and I am a bit behind. So we'll see if I can make that happen again. And that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. I will see you next time. I post every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. I am hopefully gonna be posting some extra videos on Wednesdays as well, so stay tuned for those. If you're new here, I would love for you to hang out with us some more and subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye.